Elias Rowe had trained for first contact the way other people trained for storms. He learned protocols, memorized greetings, studied thousands of pages about alien biology and station safety. He practiced calm breathing until he could slow his heart with a thought. Still, when the doors of the meeting chamber slid open, his mouth went a little dry. The room inside was bright and quiet, built to be neutral for all species. The ceiling lights were soft, like a cloudy day. The air smelled faintly of clean metal and warm spice, tuned by the station's filters. A long table sat in the center, but it was not really for eating. It was for distance, for boundaries, for the thin line between peace and panic. Across the room stood the Cathari envoy and her attendants. They were taller than the human delegates, with long limbs and a smooth, pale surface that looked like skin but had a gentle shine, like pearl. Their eyes were large and dark, but not empty, more like still water with a deep reflection. Thin, glowing lines ran along their necks and across their wrists, shifting faintly with their breathing. The lines were not decoration. Human scientists believed they were part of how the Cathari showed emotion. Elias reminded himself to look, not stare. At his side, the station's translation specialist, Mara Ven, adjusted the collar device on his uniform. "Mic is working," she murmured. "Your tone will matter." They read tone like we read facial expressions. Elias nodded. "I'll keep it steady." Mara's eyes flicked toward the Cathari envoy. "And watch your jokes." He gave a small smile. "No promises." That was the problem with Elias. He did his job well and he was careful, but he also used humor when rooms got tense. Humor could cut fear in half. It could turn strangers into people. It was a human tool old as firelight, but humor also depended on shared meaning, and shared meaning was fragile. The human delegation entered together. 2 security officers stayed by the door, not aggressive, simply present. Elias walked in the center as protocol required because he was the assigned cultural liaison. He was not the highest-ranking official. He was the one who had to make the first moment feel safe. The Cathari envoy stepped forward when the humans stopped at their side of the table. She moved with an easy grace, like she expected the ground to support her no matter where she placed her feet. Her attendants stayed behind her in a half-circle, their glowing lines dim and still. "I am Saranthra of the Cathari Conquered," the translator rendered in Elias' ear, turning her musical language into basic English. The voice of the translator sounded calm, almost gentle, but Elias knew it was doing a lot of work. The Cathari language did not place meaning only in words. It carried meaning in timing, in pitch, in pause. Elias placed a hand over his chest, the gesture the humans had chosen after weeks of research. "I am Elias Rowe of the United Terran Coalition," he said. "We thank you for meeting with us." Saranthra's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in focus. The faint lines along her wrists brightened, then softened. "We thank you for meeting with us," she repeated in her own tongue as if tasting the sounds. There was a pause, the kind that made humans want to fill it. Elias resisted. He remembered Mara's warning. The Cathari used silence to show respect. Silence was not emptiness, it was space. Behind Elias, Director Halden, the senior official, began the formal message about mutual interest and peaceful cooperation. His voice was clear but a little stiff. He spoke like someone reading an agreement in a courtroom. It was safe language, careful language. Elias watched Saranthra while Halden spoke. The Cathari envoy did not interrupt. She didn't nod the way humans did. Instead, her glowing lines changed in tiny waves like a slow current. When Halden finished, Saranthra responded. The translation device carried her reply into Elias' ear. "We hear your wish for a steady path. The Conquered has walked long roads in darkness." "We do not fear the dark," she said, "but we are tired of it. We seek a light that does not burn." Elias felt something tighten in his chest. The words were simple, but the meaning behind them was heavy. He had read the Cathari history brief. Their home region had seen wars, extinction-level storms, and a long era of isolation. They were new to wider space again after centuries of closing themselves away. Halden answered with another careful statement, promising peaceful intentions, shared science, trade possibilities. The meeting moved along in polite steps, like people crossing a thin bridge. Then came the cultural exchange segment. That part was Elias' job. He stepped forward slightly, just enough to signal he was taking the lead. "We brought small gifts," he said. "Not valuable items, just symbols." An assistant rolled forward a case and opened it. Inside were simple items: a set of earth seeds sealed in a sterile capsule, a small carved piece of wood from an old forest, and a digital library chip containing public human art and music. "We hope it shows respect," Elias said. "Our worlds are different, but we can still share beauty." Saranthra leaned in. The glowing lines at her neck brightened, swirling in a pattern. One of her attendants made a soft sound, and Elias' translator offered a brief note: interest, approval. Saranthra lifted the seed capsule carefully, as if it were alive already. "This is future," she said through the translator. "Yes," Elias replied. "It's a promise that something can grow." For the first time, Saranthra's mouth shifted slightly. Cathari mouths were subtle. Humans had trouble reading them, but Elias thought it might be a smile. The Cathari gifts were next. Their attendants brought forward a small case of their own. Inside was a thin disc that looked like glass, but when Elias peered into it, it showed moving patterns, like memories made visible. The translator called it a soul record, an art form that stored emotion and story in light. Elias looked up. "That's beautiful." Saranthra's eyes watched him very closely. "It holds a journey," she said. "Our journey." Halden leaned forward. "We are honored," he said. "We will keep it safe." Elias sensed the room relaxing just a little. The air felt less sharp. The human's shoulders dropped a fraction. Even the security officers looked less rigid. This was the moment Elias usually used a small joke, something safe, something that made everyone breathe easier. A gentle human habit: show you are not a machine, show you are not a threat. He remembered Mara's warning again. He told himself he would keep it harmless. Saranthra turned slightly toward him, as if she recognized that he was the one trying to connect. Her glowing lines shifted into a warmer hue, almost gold. The translator didn't say that. It didn't translate color. But Elias had studied the charts. Gold tones often meant openness. Elias took a breath. "You know," he said, keeping his voice light, "I think you're doing better at diplomacy than half the people I've met. If you were human, you'd be a cute wife." He meant it like a playful compliment, the kind people said at parties when teasing friends. It was old-fashioned and silly. A joke about how someone was kind and steady, the kind of joke that could be brushed off with laughter. The instant the words left his mouth, the room changed. Halden's head snapped toward Elias so fast it looked painful. Mara went perfectly still. One of the human aides made a strangled sound, like they had swallowed air wrong. Across the table, Saranthra froze. The glowing lines on her neck and wrists flickered. Then they went very dim, like a light turning down in a single breath. Her attendants stiffened as well, their bodies shifting into a defensive posture that was not openly aggressive, but alert. For one terrible second, Elias wondered if he had just insulted her or made some kind of forbidden statement. Elias began, trying to correct himself, but Halden lifted a hand slightly, stopping him. The director's face was pale. Saranthra stared at Elias. The silence stretched. It didn't feel respectful anymore. It felt like a blade held at the throat. Elias felt heat rush to his cheeks. He forced himself to stay calm, to not fidget. He had made mistakes in life, but rarely in rooms that could start wars. Saranthra took a single step forward. Her attendants did not stop her, but their glowing lines pulsed faintly, as if they were sending a warning through light. She raised her hand slowly, palm facing him. It was not the human gesture for stop. It was something else. It looked like a sign of focus, like she was asking the room to hold still. Then she spoke, not loudly, but clearly. The translator device took a moment longer than usual, as if it was struggling to choose the correct meaning. "I accept," the translator finally said in Elias' ear. Elias blinked. "You accept." Saranthra's glowing lines shimmered again, but this time the pattern was sharp, like fine cracks of light. Her voice lowered almost to a whisper. "I accept, in truth." The humans did not move. Halden looked as if he might faint. Mara's eyes were wide, and she was staring at the translation console on her wrist like it had betrayed her. Elias swallowed. His mind raced through possibilities. Was wife understood as a political role? Was it a title? Had he just offered her legal citizenship? Was he accidentally proposing some kind of alliance? He tried to speak carefully. "Envoy Saranthra, I believe there is a misunderstanding in human culture." Saranthra interrupted him, but the interruption was gentle, like a hand laid over a mouth to quiet a crying child. "In Cathari culture," she said, "there is no misunderstanding." The translator's tone shifted slightly, as if it was pulling from a special protocol file. Saranthra continued. We do not give joining words lightly, we do not speak them as play, we do not mock them. When joining words are given, they bind a life. Elias felt his stomach drop. He heard Mara breathe in sharply. Halden leaned forward, voice tight. Envoy Sarenthra, we apologize, our liaison did not intend. Sarenthra turned her gaze toward Halden. The glowing lines at her neck warmed again, but not in comfort, more like controlled heat. The human spoke, she said. I answered, the conquered will hear, the stars will hear. Joining words were spoken. I accepted. The path is set. The translator added a soft, alert tone in Elias' ear, cultural hazard. Elias forced himself to keep breathing. If he panicked, the room would panic. If the room panicked, security might move. If security moved, the Cathari attendants might react. One wrong step could turn misunderstanding into blood. He lifted his hands slowly, palms open, a human sign of peace. Sarenthra, he said, using her name without title, hoping it would sound personal, not political. I do not want to harm your people or your customs. If my words caused a bond in your understanding, then I take responsibility for the harm. But I need to know what this means to you. Sarenthra studied him. For a moment, the glowing lines on her wrist softened, like a storm cloud thinning. It means, she said, that you spoke trust. Elias stared. I spoke trust. You made a claim of closeness, Sarenthra replied. You did it in front of witnesses. You named a joining role. In our history, that is not done unless the speaker is ready to be bound. Elias' mind caught on one word, history. Something old and painful was hiding behind her calm voice. Myra finally found her voice. Elias, she whispered urgently, the phrase might have mapped to their joining vow structure. The translator could have matched intent, not literal meaning. Elias kept his eyes on Sarenthra. If a joining bond is sacred, he said carefully, why would you accept so quickly? Sarenthra's silence returned, but it was different now. It was heavy with thought. When she spoke again, her voice was softer and the translator struggled less, as if her meaning was clear. Because the conquered is dying, she said. The words hit the room like a cold wind. Halden's mouth opened, then closed. One of the human aides shifted, forgetting to be still. Sarenthra continued. Not by plague, not by war, by shrinking, by fear. We built walls so strong we forgot how to open doors. We are alive, but we are not growing. We have ships, but no hunger for the stars. We have songs, but they echo in empty halls. The glowing lines at her neck dimmed, then brightened like a heart trying to beat through sorrow. We chose this meeting, she said, because we wished to change, we wished to risk trust. You risked it first. Elias felt his throat tighten. He had made a joke, a careless joke, yet she heard it as courage, or maybe she wanted to hear it that way, maybe she needed to. Sarenthra stepped even closer to the table. The space between them was now not much. Elias could see fine texture on her skin, like tiny patterns under the pearl shine. In my youth, she whispered, I studied old joining histories. There were times long ago when Cathari joined with outsiders. Not often, not lightly, but it happened. Those bonds ended wars. Those bonds opened trade. Those bonds saved lives. She lifted her hand again, and the glowing lines on her wrist formed a slow, steady spiral. Our elders fear such things now, she said. They say trust is a doorway for knives. They say closeness is weakness. Yet you humans crossed void to meet us. You brought seeds. You brought art. You spoke a joining phrase as if closeness is normal. Elias wanted to say, no, it was just a joke, I didn't mean it like that. But he could see in her eyes that it would break something important if he dismissed it too fast. Not because it would hurt her feelings, but because it would crush a rare hope she had chosen to take. He steadied himself. Sarenthra, he said gently, in my culture those words do not always mean a vow. Sometimes they are teasing. Sometimes they are a way to show friendliness. Her gaze did not waver. Then your culture is brave, she answered, to speak closeness without fear. Elias felt a strange mix of shame and pride. Shame because he knew it was not bravery, it was habit and carelessness. Pride because, in her eyes, humanity's casual warmth looked like strength. Halden cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the meeting. Envoy Sarenthra, we will need time to consult. If there is a binding cultural consequence, we must ensure we do not disrespect your customs. Sarenthra looked toward Halden again. Consult, she echoed, as if the idea was unfamiliar. Humans are many voices, we understand. Then she turned back to Elias. But the joining words were spoken, she said. The acceptance was given. If you reject now, it will not only shame me, it will shame the conquered. It will teach our fearful ones that trust is always punished. Elias felt the pressure settle on his shoulders. It was not just a personal embarrassment. It was a political weight, a cultural cliff edge. He tried to speak slowly, clearly. What do you expect from this joining as you understand it? Do you expect ownership, command? Control, Sarenthra's glowing lines flashed sharply, almost like offense. No, she said. Joining is not control, joining is promise. Two lives keep each other safe. Two minds share burden. Two voices stand together when others shout. She paused, then added, almost reluctantly, and yes, it is also affection, but affection is not a leash. Elias let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. At least she wasn't demanding something cruel. Still, the idea of being bound to an alien envoy because of a joke was unreal. Mara's console beeped quietly. She leaned close to Elias and whispered, "Station Cultural Database is flagging this as a high-level bonding declaration in Kethari law. Not exactly marriage, but similar weight. If this goes public, it's going to explode." As if the universe had overheard her, one of the station cameras in the ceiling rotated slightly, tracking movement. Elias noticed it and felt a new wave of dread. This was on record. Everything was on record. Sarenthra's attendants made soft, clicking sounds. The translator offered a quick interpretation, concern, warning. Sarenthra lifted her hand without looking back and the sound stopped. Her control over them was calm and absolute. Elias searched for a path that did not insult her and did not trap humanity into something dangerous. He needed a bridge, not a wall. He looked at Sarenthra and spoke with the most honest tone he could manage. "I will not reject you in front of witnesses," he said. "Not today." "Not like that, but I cannot promise something I do not understand. I will learn your customs. I will speak with my leaders. I will find a way to honor your trust without harming either of our peoples." Sarenthra watched him, and the glowing lines on her wrist slowed, calming into a steady pattern. The translator did not need to add emotion tags. Elias could feel the shift in the room. "You choose responsibility," she whispered. "That is good." Halden exhaled quietly, as if he had been holding his breath for minutes. Sarenthra stepped back, giving space again, returning to the formal distance of diplomacy, but her eyes stayed on Elias as if a thread now connected them. "The conquered will wait," she said. "But not forever. Trust is a living thing. It dies if kept in darkness." Elias nodded slowly. "Understood." The meeting ended soon after, but not in the smooth way it was supposed to. The humans offered a polite closing statement. The Kethari replied with a calm farewell. Hands were not shaken. No one dared. When the Kethari delegation left the chamber, the doors sliding shut behind them, the human side stayed frozen for several seconds. Then the room burst into motion. Halden turned on Elias with a look that mixed anger and panic. "What in the void were you thinking?" Elias opened his mouth, then closed it. Any answer sounded stupid because the truth was stupid. He had tried to lighten the mood. He had thrown a joke into a place where words were weapons and bridges at the same time. Mara stepped between them slightly, her hands raised. "Director, yelling won't help. We need damage control." Halden's face was tight. "Damage control? This could be a treaty-level disaster." Elias rubbed his forehead. "Or a treaty-level opportunity," he said quietly. Halden stared. "Explain." Elias looked toward the closed door where Sarenthra had disappeared. He could still hear her whisper in his mind, "I accept." In truth, she didn't look offended, Elias said. She looked like someone who had been waiting a long time for a door to open. Mara's voice was low. "That's what scares me. If her people treat this as sacred, then our response will shape their entire view of humanity." Halden's jaw worked as he fought the urge to shout again. "We need a full briefing. Now, and Elias, you are not leaving this station." Elias nodded because that part made sense. He felt the weight of the moment settling deeper, like gravity increasing. Outside the chamber, the station hummed with quiet life. Drones moved along corridors. Distant voices echoed. Somewhere beyond the hull, the stars burned cold and bright, uncaring. Elias had walked into a room expecting to negotiate trade and friendship. He walked out carrying a vow he never meant to give and a hope he was afraid to drop. And somewhere down the hall, Sarenthra was returning to her ship with her attendants, her glowing lines steady, her face calm. In her mind, the path was already set. In his, the path had just become the most dangerous road he had ever seen, because it was paved not with guns or engines, but with trust. Elias did not sleep. The guest quarters assigned to him were quiet, too quiet. The lights were dimmed to a soft blue meant to calm the mind. but his thoughts kept running like footsteps in an empty hall. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sarenthra standing across the table, glowing lines fading as she whispered her acceptance. He rolled onto his side and stared at the wall display. It showed a slow drift of stars, a peaceful loop meant to help visitors feel connected to space instead of trapped inside metal. Tonight, it only made him feel small. Somewhere in the station, teams were already working. Analysts, cultural experts, legal advisors. His joke had become their emergency. A soft chime sounded at his door. Elias sat up. "Come in." The door slid open, and Myra stepped inside, holding a tablet. Her hair was pulled back in a rush tie, and dark circles sat under her eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "Good," she said quietly. "You're awake." "Wasn't planning on it," Elias replied. She sat on the edge of the small table near the wall and tapped the tablet, bringing up a stream of text and symbols. "We've been digging into every Cathari record we have. Public archives, old translation notes, even half-broken data from their early probes." Elias leaned forward. "And," Mara took a breath, "joining is not just personal, it's political, cultural, historical. In the past, when a Cathari bonded with an outsider, it often marked the start of long alliances, trade networks, shared defense, sometimes even shared colonies." Elias rubbed his face. "So I accidentally became a walking treaty." "Pretty much," he groaned softly. "That's not fair, I didn't ask for this." Mara's expression softened. "Neither did she." Elias paused. That was true. Sarenthra hadn't tricked him. She had answered what she believed was a real offer. "What happens if I back out?" he asked. Mara hesitated. "Social shame for her at least, maybe political fallout. The elders might use it as proof that humans can't be trusted. And if I go along with it, then every other species watching will assume humanity just tied itself to the conquered in a special way. Expectations will follow, pressure, jealousy." Elias leaned back against the bed. "So either way, someone gets hurt." Mara nodded. "That's diplomacy." Another chime sounded. This one was sharper, official. "Director Halden," Elias muttered. The wall display shifted to show Halden's face. He looked tired but focused. "Elias, we have a development." Elias straightened. "Good or bad?" "Both," Halden said. "The Cathari have requested a private meeting." "Not a formal session, just you and Sarenthra." Elias blinked. "Just me?" "She specifically named you," Halden replied. "Said the joining words were between two voices, not two councils." Mara let out a low whistle. "That's intense." Halden nodded. "We'll be nearby, monitoring." "But this is your moment, Elias. Whatever you say in that room will shape the next decade." Elias felt a knot form in his stomach. "When?" "Now." The corridor outside the meeting chamber felt longer than it had the day before. The lights reflected off the smooth metal floor, stretching into pale lines that led forward like paths he couldn't turn away from. Two human security officers stood at the entrance, and across from them, two Cathari attendants waited, tall and still. Their glowing lines were low and steady, not aggressive. When Elias approached, one of the Cathari inclined their head slightly. The door slid open without a sound. The room inside was smaller than the main chamber. There was no long table, no formal setup. Just two chairs, spaced apart, and a wide window showing open space beyond the station's curve. The stars outside looked close enough to touch. Sarenthra stood near the window. Her back was to the door, her glowing lines reflecting faintly in the glass. She turned when Elias stepped inside, and the door closed behind him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Up close, Elias noticed details he hadn't before. Fine ridges along her arms, like soft waves frozen in skin. The gentle rise and fall of her chest as she breathed. The way her eyes didn't blink as often as a human's, as if she didn't need to. "You came," she said. "I said I would," Elias replied. She tilted her head slightly. "Humans say many things. You follow them more often than I expected." He gave a small, tired smile. "I'm trying." They sat down across from each other. The chairs adjusted automatically, shifting shape to support both their bodies in equal comfort. For a few seconds, they just looked at each other. The stars outside drifted slowly, silent witnesses. Sarenthra spoke first. "Your leaders are afraid." Elias didn't deny it. "They have reason to be. This is bigger than both of us." Her glowing lines pulsed softly. "Everything that matters is bigger than the ones who start it." Elias thought about that. "You knew this would cause trouble when you accepted, didn't you?" She hesitated. The lines dimmed slightly. "I knew it would cause change. Trouble is a kind of change." "Why you?" Elias asked. "Why take this risk personally?" You could have treated it as a misunderstanding and walked away. Sarenthra looked back toward the stars. Because I am tired of watching my people hide behind careful words. We speak of survival, but we live like ghosts. When you spoke joining words so easily, I saw something we lost. Carelessness, Elias offered. Courage, she corrected. He sighed. You give me too much credit. Perhaps, she said. But sometimes it is better to believe in the best meaning of an action rather than the smallest. Elias leaned forward slightly. Sarenthra, I need to understand what you expect from me, not as a symbol, as a person. She met his eyes. I expect honesty. I expect you to stand when my people are questioned. I expect you to let me stand when yours are. He thought about the weight of that. And affection, her glowing lines warmed. Affection grows, it is not commanded, it is not assumed. It is built like a bridge over a deep gap. That was not as frightening as he had imagined. Do you even like humans? Elias asked. She considered. I like that you laugh in tense rooms. I like that you bring seeds to strangers. I like that you speak closeness as if it is not rare. He let out a soft breath. We mess up a lot, too. Her mouth shifted slightly. This time he was sure it was a smile. So do we. A soft light appeared on the floor between them, a projection from Sarenthra's wrist. Shapes formed in the air, showing moving images made of light. This is a memory, she said. Not for the public, for you. The image showed a wide, open space filled with tall, glowing structures. Cathari moved through it in large numbers, their lines bright and colorful. There was sound, too, a deep, layered hum that felt like singing. This was our hall of voices, Sarenthra said. Before the closing, the image shifted. The hall grew empty, lights dimmed. The singing faded into silence. We shut ourselves away after loss, she continued. We told ourselves it was safety, but safety without connection is another kind of ending. The image faded. Elias swallowed. You're asking me to help open that hall again. I am asking you to walk toward it with me, she said. He looked down at his hands. They were just hands. Human hands, not meant to carry the hope of a whole species. What if I fail? He asked. Sarenthra leaned forward slightly. Then we will fail together. That is what joining means. There was a quiet knock at the door. Elias knew it was probably a signal from security or Halden, checking in without interrupting too hard. Sarenthra glanced toward the door. Your many voices wait. They always do, Elias said. He stood slowly. I can't promise the future you want. But I can promise I won't treat this like a joke again. Her glowing lines pulsed steady and bright. That is enough to begin. The door opened and Mara stepped inside, trying to look neutral and failing. Everything okay? She asked. Elias nodded. We're talking. That's something. Sarenthra rose as well. The Conquered will announce that discussions are ongoing. No final meaning will be declared yet. Mara's shoulders relaxed a fraction. Thank you. Sarenthra's gaze returned to Elias. But the path is still open. Elias met her eyes. I know. Later in the strategy room, Halden paced back and forth while analysts spoke over one another. They're framing it as a cultural exploration, one said. Media channels are already speculating, another added. Some are calling it a bond of stars. Halden turned to Elias. You've become a symbol whether you like it or not. Elias sat in his chair, exhausted. I didn't want to be. Few people who change things do, Halden replied. Myra leaned against the wall, arms crossed. The good news is other species are watching with curiosity instead of fear. The bad news is they're watching. Elias closed his eyes for a moment. So what's the plan? Halden stopped pacing. The plan is to not rush. We'll propose joint cultural missions. Shared research teams. Let this bond become a bridge, not a leash. Elias nodded slowly. And me? Halden studied him. You're the face of this, Elias. Whether you like it or not, we'll support you, but you'll have to keep walking that line between personal and political. Elias stood up. I already am. That evening he stood alone by one of the station's wide observation windows. The stars looked the same as they always had, distant, bright, silent. Somewhere out there, Sarenthra was on her ship, likely looking at a different window, a different stretch of the same endless dark. He wondered if she felt the same strange mix of fear and hope he did. His console chimed softly. A message appeared, translated into simple text. Sarenthra, the hall is quiet tonight, but I can hear footsteps in my mind. Elias stared at the words, then typed back. Elias, I think I hear them too, not sure where they lead. A moment passed. Sarenthra, that is the sound of a door opening. Elias leaned his forehead against the glass, watching a distant star flare gently. He had crossed space to be a diplomat. Now he was something else entirely. And the galaxy, whether he was ready or not, was beginning to follow the path that started with a joke and became a promise. The station did not feel quiet anymore. Elias noticed it as he walked through the main corridor the next morning. There were more people than usual. Humans, Cathari, and even a few other species whose shapes and colors he did not yet know well. Some moved in small groups, talking in low voices. Others stopped when they saw him and pretended not to stare. News traveled fast in space. He kept his eyes forward, his steps steady. He had learned quickly that confidence, even when fake, made others feel safer. At the far end of the corridor, a large open area had been prepared for what Halden called a shared presence event. It was not a meeting, not a ceremony, not a treaty signing. It was something in between, a space where humans and Cathari would stand together in public and show the galaxy that whatever was happening between them was not a mistake or a secret. Elias hated how much weight those simple words carried. Mara walked beside him, her tablet in hand. "Media feeds are lighting up," she said. "Some species think this is a sign of a new alliance, others think it's a trap." Elias sighed. "Do any of them think it's just two people trying not to mess up?" Mara gave a small smile. "Not many." They reached the edge of the open area. A wide, circular platform stood in the center with soft lights rising from the floor in slow, gentle patterns. It was designed to feel neutral, not human, not Cathari, just space. On the other side of the platform, Sarenthra waited. Her attendant stood behind her, but farther back than usual. This time, she stood alone at the front. Her glowing lines were brighter than Elias had ever seen them, not sharp, not tense, but full, like a steady flame. When she saw Elias, her posture shifted slightly. It was a small movement, but he recognized it now as attention, maybe even relief. They stepped onto the platform from opposite sides. The station's cameras floated at a respectful distance, their soft hum barely audible. Screens around the open area showed their images to the gathered crowd, and Elias knew to thousands of viewers across different systems. Sarenthra spoke first. "You walk into many eyes." "So do you," Elias replied. She looked around at the gathered beings. "Once my people feared being seen. Humans still do," Elias said. "We just pretend we don't." That earned him another subtle smile. A soft tone sounded through the area, a signal that the event had begun. Halden's voice came over the station speakers, brief and careful, welcoming all observers and explaining that this was a moment of cultural sharing, not a formal agreement. Elias barely listened. His focus stayed on Sarenthra. She raised her hand slowly, and the glowing lines along her arm pulsed. The Cathari in the crowd responded, their own lines brightening in answer. It was like a silent wave of light moving through them. "This is a calling gesture," she explained quietly to Elias. "It means I speak not just for myself." Elias nodded. "Then I should probably do the same." He turned toward the human side of the crowd. There was no glowing light to guide him, no ancient gesture, so he did the only thing he could think of. He placed his hand over his chest. The humans in the crowd noticed. Some mirrored the gesture. It spread in a small, uneven ripple. Sarenthra watched with interest. "You made one," she said softly. "A what?" "A calling gesture," she replied. He huffed a breath. "Didn't even know I was trying." She turned back to the crowd and spoke, her voice carrying clearly even without the translator's help. "We stand in a place between paths," she said. "Behind us are old roads of safety and silence. Ahead of us are new roads of risk and sound." The translator echoed her words in simple, steady English across the area. "My people have walked carefully for a long time," Sarenthra continued. "We believed careful steps would keep us alive, but careful steps also kept us alone." She paused. The glowing lines on her neck softened. "A human spoke to me without fear," she said. "Not with a weapon, not with a demand, with a simple claim of closeness. I chose to believe that claim." Elias felt his face warm as eyes turned toward him. Sarenthra went on. "Belief is a fragile thing. It can be broken easily, but when it is held by two, it becomes stronger than when it is held by one." She lowered her hand. Elias took a breath and stepped forward. "I didn't mean to start something this big," he admitted. His voice carried clear and honest. "I made a joke. I spoke without thinking about how my words would land." There was a small stir in the human crowd. Halden's shoulders stiffened. "But when Sarenthra accepted my words," Elias continued, "I realized something. Even a joke can be a door. You can slam it shut, or you can look through it and see who's standing on the other side." He looked at Sarenthra. I saw someone who wasn't trying to take from us. She was trying to walk with us. The silence that followed was not tense. It was thoughtful. A Cathari elder stepped forward from the back of their group. The glowing lines along their body were dimmer, slower, like old light. Envoy Sarenthra, the elder said, their voice translated into a low, careful tone. You walk a sharp edge. Trust has cut us before. Sarenthra bowed her head slightly. I know. The elder turned their gaze to Elias. And you, human, you carry a promise you did not mean to lift. Why should we believe you will not drop it? Elias felt every camera, every eye, every distant viewer lock onto him. He thought about what to say. He thought about clever answers, diplomatic answers, safe answers. Then he chose a simple one. Because I know what it feels like to be dropped, he said. The elder waited. My world has lost friends, Elias continued. Allies who turned away, colonies that went silent. We tell ourselves it's just how space is. Big, cold, uncaring, but every time someone disappears, it still hurts. He spread his hands. I don't want to be another silence in someone else's history. The elder studied him for a long moment. Then they inclined their heads slightly, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. The event ended without applause, without cheers. It didn't need them. The crowd slowly broke apart, conversations starting in many languages, many tones. Sarenthra and Elias stepped off the platform together, walking side by side instead of apart. You stood well, she said. So did you, he replied. Your elder didn't look happy. They rarely do when change is near, she answered. They walked down a quieter corridor away from the noise and attention. Their steps echoed softly against the metal floor. Do you ever wish you hadn't accepted? Elias asked. Sarenthra considered. Sometimes. Fear is a loud voice, but it never tells me where to go, only where not to. Elias nodded. Yeah, we have that voice too. They reached a small observation alcove. It was empty, the stars outside stretched wide and open. Sarenthra stopped there. My people are divided, she said. Some see you as a bridge, others see you as a crack in our walls. And my people are no different, Elias replied. Some think you're our future, others think you're a risk we shouldn't take. She turned to face him fully. What do you think? Elias hesitated. Then he said, I think you're a person who's tired of closed doors. Her glowing lines warmed. Before either of them could say more, Elias' console chimed. He sighed and checked it. Mara's face appeared. We've got a situation. Of course we do, Elias muttered. What kind? A trade convoy from the Ralthais Union just arrived, Mara said. They're demanding a meeting. They think your bond gives humans special access to Cathari space. Elias closed his eyes briefly. So it begins. Sarenthra listened, even though she couldn't hear Mara's words. Others will test this path, she said. They already are, Elias replied. An hour later, they sat in another meeting room, this one crowded. The Ralthais representatives were sharp-edged beings, their voices fast and clipped, their movements quick and restless. You claim closeness, one of them said, staring at Elias. Closeness means advantage. We demand equal access. Halden leaned forward, careful and calm. There is no formal agreement yet, but there is a symbol, the Ralthais pressed. Symbols move markets, symbols move fleets. Sarenthra spoke, her voice steady. There is no gate to our space that opens only for humans. Yet, the Ralthais replied. Elias felt tension rise like heat. He leaned forward. This isn't about gates or trade lanes, he said. It's about trust. If you treat every connection as a resource to be taken, you turn every meeting into a battlefield. The Ralthais clicked in what might have been amusement. That is how survival works. Sarenthra's glowing lines sharpened. That is how survival ends. The room went quiet. The Ralthais studied her, then Elias. You speak with one voice now, they said. That is interesting. Not one voice, Elias corrected. Two. Standing together. The meeting ended without threats, but without warmth either. The Ralthais left already planning, Elias was sure. Later, as the station lights dimmed for the artificial night cycle, Elias and Sarenthra stood again by the stars. Do you regret pulling me into this? Elias asked softly. Sarenthra shook her head. No, but I worry for you. He raised an eyebrow. That's new. Joining creates concern, she said. It is not only warmth, it is weight. Elias leaned against the wall. I'm starting to feel that. They stood in silence for a while, watching distant ships move like tiny sparks across the dark. On my world, Elias said, we have a saying. We make our own monsters. It means sometimes the things we fear are created by how we act. Sarenthra considered. Then perhaps we can also make our own lights, he smiled. I like that better. A message appeared on Elia's console. This one wasn't from Mara or Halden, it was from a public channel. A small, distant colony had sent a simple broadcast. Humans and Cathari together. Maybe we can be together too. Elias showed it to Saranthra. Her glowing lines brightened, slow and steady. The Hall of Voices, she whispered. It is not empty anymore. Elias looked at the stars, at the endless dark that suddenly felt a little less cold. The path ahead was still dangerous. Other species would test them. Politics would twist every word. Fear would always wait in the shadows. But now there were footsteps on that path. And they were not walking it alone. The first sign of trouble came quietly. Elias was in the station's shared garden when his console chimed. The garden was one of the few places that felt alive instead of engineered. Real soil sat in wide trays. Plants from a dozen worlds grew under soft light. The air smelled faintly of green things and water. He had come there to think. Saranthra stood a short distance away, watching a small tree from Earth that had finally sprouted new leaves. Her glowing lines were calm, slow, like a steady breath. When Elias checked his console, Mara's face appeared tense. "We have a situation," she said. "Multiple ships are changing course toward the station. Not hostile, but not invited either." Elias straightened. "Who?" "Several minor trade groups, a few independent fleets, and one larger power that's been quiet for a long time." Elias felt his chest tighten. "They all want a piece of whatever they think this bond is," Mara nodded. "They think you and Saranthra opened a door. Now they're rushing to be first through it." Elias glanced at Saranthra. She could read his face well enough now to know something was wrong. "They come," she said softly. "Yes," Elias replied, "and they don't all come with good intentions." Within hours, the station's main observation deck was filled with distant lights. Ships of many shapes and sizes hung in space like a loose ring of stars. Halden called an emergency council. Representatives from several species joined through holograms or in person. The room buzzed with overlapping voices and different forms of speech. "They're demanding talks," one advisor said. "Some want trade rights, others want alliance talks. A few are offering protection. That usually means control." Halden rubbed his temples. "We can't meet them all separately. That would turn this into a power game." Saranthra stood at the edge of the room, listening. Her glowing lines shifted slowly, thoughtful. Elias looked at her. "What are you thinking?" She stepped forward. "If many voices come to one door and the door opens only for a few, the rest will try to break it down." The room went quiet. "What do you suggest?" Halden asked. Saranthra met his gaze. "We do not make a door for one, we make a hall for all." Elias felt a spark of understanding. "A shared space, open talks, everyone together." Halden hesitated. "That's risky, old rivalries, old grudges, one wrong word and this station becomes a battlefield." "Or a beginning," Elias said. Saranthra nodded. "The Hall of Voices was built for this, many speaking, none ruling." Halden looked at the gathered advisors. Some looked nervous, some looked curious, a few looked hopeful. Finally, he exhaled. "All right, we try it your way." The main platform was transformed. Lights rose higher, casting warm patterns across the wide space. Translation systems were boosted, layered, tested again and again. Security stood ready but distant, their presence quiet rather than threatening. One by one, representatives arrived. Some walked, some floated. Some appeared as projected forms of light and sound. The air filled with a low hum of different languages, different rhythms of speech. Elias stood beside Saranthra at the center. He leaned toward her. "No pressure." Her glowing lines warmed slightly. "Pressure makes stars." The first to speak was a tall, sharp-featured being from a trade coalition. "You claim this gathering is open," they said. "Yet it was your bond that summoned us." Saranthra answered calmly. "It was not a bond that summoned you. It was a story. Stories travel faster than ships." A ripple of quiet moved through the crowd. Elias stepped forward. "We didn't call you here to promise special deals or secret paths. We called you here because everyone deserves to hear the same words at the same time." A murmur spread. Some liked that. Others did not. A voice from the back cut through. "And what are those words?" Elias took a breath. He hadn't planned a speech. He didn't want one. He looked at Saranthra. She gave a small nod. "We are tired of closed doors," Elias said. "All of us. Every species here has lost something to fear, to silence, to choosing safety over connection." He gestured around the room. "This station isn't human space. It isn't Cathari space. It's in between. That's what we're offering. An in-between, a place where you don't come to take. You come to speak." Saranthra raised her hand, glowing lines bright. In our old halls, we believed that if enough voices were heard, no single one could become a shout that silenced the rest. A smaller species, barely taller than a human child, spoke up. And if someone lies? Elias answered without hesitation. Then someone else will call them out. That's what a crowd is good for. A low, thoughtful sound moved through the room. The sharp-featured trader leaned forward. You ask for trust without offering power. Saranthra replied, power is what breaks trust. We offer presence instead. There was a long pause, then unexpectedly a voice from a distant hologram spoke. We will try this hall. Another followed. So will we. More voices joined, not all, some stayed silent. Some disconnected, but enough remained. Hours passed as questions were asked, concerns raised, histories shared. Grievances spoken aloud instead of whispered in back channels. It wasn't peaceful. There were sharp words, accusations, old wounds reopened, but no one walked out. At one point, a heated exchange between two rival groups rose to the edge of shouting. Security shifted, ready. Elias stepped between them without thinking. Hey, he said, voice firm but not loud. This is the part where you decide if this hall becomes another wall. The rivals stared at him, then at Saranthra standing steady at his side. Slowly, the tension eased. They didn't agree, but they sat back down. As the gathering stretched into the station's artificial night, something changed. The voices grew less sharp. The questions more curious. Elias leaned close to Saranthra. Your hall works. She watched the room, glowing lines soft and bright. It works because you stood in it with me. When the last representative finally left, the platform was quiet again. The lights dimmed to their normal, gentle glow. Elias felt like he had run a long distance without moving his feet. Halden approached, looking both exhausted and amazed. That could have gone very badly. But it didn't, Elias said. Halden nodded. You two just changed how this station will be remembered. Later, alone again by the observation window, Elias and Saranthra stood side by side. The ring of ships was still there, but some were already drifting away, carrying stories instead of demands. Saranthra broke the silence. My elders sent a message. Elias tensed. Good or bad? Both, she said, and there was a hint of humor in her tone now. They say I am reckless. They also say the hall has not been this full in generations. Elias smiled. Sounds like a win. She looked at him. And your leaders? He checked his console. A message from Halden waited. They're calling this the Pact of Two Skies, Elias said. Not a treaty, not a bond, a promise to keep this hall open. Saranthra's glowing lines shimmered in a pattern he hadn't seen before. Two skies, she repeated. I like that. Elias leaned against the window. So what happens to us now that the galaxy thinks we started something? She considered. We keep walking. Together, he asked. Yes, she said simply. A small group of Cathari children passed by the window outside in the corridor, their glowing lines bright and playful. One of them pressed a hand to the glass, staring at Elias and Saranthra with open curiosity. Elias lifted his hand and pressed it to the glass in return. The child's lines flashed with delight before they were pulled along by an adult. Saranthra watched, something soft in her eyes. That, she said, is why I accepted. Elias nodded. That's why I'm still here. The stars outside seemed less distant now, less cold. In the days that followed, the station changed. Shared research teams formed. Artists from different species filled halls with light, sound, and shapes that had never existed together before. Trade talks happened in open rooms instead of closed channels. It wasn't perfect. There were arguments, setbacks, walkouts, but there was also laughter. Elias and Saranthra became a familiar sight walking the corridors together, not as rulers, not as symbols. Just as two people who had chosen not to step away. One evening they returned to the garden. The small earth tree had grown another set of leaves. Saranthra touched one gently, careful not to harm it. It lives in two worlds now, she said. Like us, Elias replied. She looked at him. Do you still think your words were a mistake? He thought about the fear, the chaos, the weight. Then about the hall, the voices, the child at the glass. No, he said. I think they were early. Her glowing lines warmed, steady and bright. Far beyond the station, in distant systems, stories began to spread. Not about a powerful human, not about a clever alien, but about a moment when a joke became a promise and two voices chose to stand together instead of stepping back. And in a galaxy that had learned to fear silence more than noise, that choice became a light others were willing to walk toward. Elias and Saranthra stood in the garden, under leaves that came from a world far away, looking out at stars that belonged to everyone. The path ahead was still unknown, but it was open, and for the first time in a long time that felt like enough.